Everybody, the simple handicap for Wednesday, October 2nd. Thank you for making me a part of your morning. I've almost butchered the day and date 3 times this week. We had the new long weekend up here in Canada that was squeezed in recently in the last couple of years. It's thrown me off. Usually the first checkpoint of the NFL season is Thanksgiving in early October for us, north of the border here. You kind of get to that point and you're like, all right, checkpoint 1 reached. You get to Thanksgiving in the U.S., checkpoint 2, pushing forward towards Christmas, and then you have the playoff stretch to take you down to the home run. This end of September long weekend has thrown me off. So there was a comment yesterday, it was Monday, not Tuesday. The date was wrong. I got the weeks wrong. Like, it's just, everything's blending together. We're in the thick of it now for NFL season. But that long weekend really throws a guy off. And so, got it right today. We nailed it. The intro is ready to go. And we're looking at the market rundown for NFL week number 5, which is the lowest volume week by far of the season for us. For me personally, betting volume is low. We still haven't released everything. The numbers across the board are very tight. This is a very difficult betting week in the NFL. Not a lot to look at. And the couple, 2 or 3 spots that do stand out where you can look at it and you can justify and argue for a reason for it have really big negatives on the bets that you're trying to make. Last week, everything fell into place. This week is really tough. So let's continue to try and make sense of it. Let's see what we get to as the week progresses. Start things off tomorrow night. Tampa Bay on the road at the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons now a 1.5-point favorite across the board. Total 43.5, shaded slightly lower. Circa went to 43. Nowhere else showing 43 this morning. That is the low price on the board. All of these Monday and Tuesday injuries that popped up don't seem to be coming to fruition. It's just a lot of veteran rest day. It's how teams are handling this. The one guy that is not participating in practice that I believe matters in this game from a point spread or total perspective is Anderson, middle linebacker for the Atlanta Falcons. He was everywhere on the field against the Saints, a key part in the middle of that Falcons D. Does not look like he is going to be able to play on Thursdays. He's the only guy for the Falcons not going through walkthroughs or practice so far this season. That's going to open up potentially opportunities for the Buccaneers to target the middle of the field. Jalen McMillan still dealing with the concussion for Tampa Bay. His status very much in jeopardy for this game as well. But Evans and Godwin both going to be out there, and it's Baker Mayfield going up against a defense that plays a ton of cover 3, a ton of zone coverage. It should be a spot where Baker indoors can find opportunities to thrive. We've seen the number come in where it's sitting at now. I think makes a lot of sense. Not a lot to really look at or take away from this game. Hopping over to Sunday, it's the Jets on the road at the Minnesota Vikings, 2.5 minus 120. Left to right across the screen. Total down as low as 40 at Chris. That's the lowest we've seen this total all week. It has been one-way money on the under since open as this total continues to come down. Weather is noteworthy because it is a semi-domed stadium with an opening over the roof in the middle of the field that has a good chunk of the field exposed. Winds 15 miles per hour. Rain percentage 60%. So curious to see the Kevin Roth weather report later today. Stats and projections and forecast models for this do make it seem like there's a decent chance we get rain. I don't think the wind is going to be as big of a factor, if at all, given how the stadium is constructed. Surface concerns, always a factor in international games. This surface is very firm and very hard. Curious to see if it does get wet, how that maybe impacts footing. So worth noting with the rain, you have Aaron Rodgers on Pat McAfee yesterday saying his knee is swollen, he is sore, was limping around at the end of the Broncos game. Is he 100%? That's yet to be determined. He probably gets a lot healthier. Devontae Adams ends up in a Jets uniform as the news is swirling around yesterday, implying that it could possibly be so. Lots going on here, but the long and the short of it is that the Jets are going on the road with a quarterback who may be less than 100% to play in an international game where the field conditions might be less than 100% as well if this weather holds up. So it makes sense. The under is coming in. No real movement on the side since those threes were taken out Sunday night, Monday morning that showed a little bit for Minnesota. We've been locked in at 2.5 ever since. Carolina on the road at the Chicago Bears. Bears a 3.5-point favorite across the board, with the one exception being Circa Sports this morning. 41.5 was the opening total. We are now up to 42. When it comes to the Carolina Panthers, I'm keeping my eye on Shai Tuttle. You never want to underestimate the importance of a good nose tackle. And the Panthers can't stop the run to begin with. And now you're down middle linebacker number 1, Shaq Thompson, middle linebacker number 2, Josie Jewell, for this game. So you take 2 key guys out of the middle of the field. You have Shai Tuttle in the middle of the defensive line, potentially banged up as well and not playing for a second game in a row. That is going to be a problem for the Carolina Panthers against the Bears offense that got the ground game going, wants to get the ground game going. Could be a good matchup for the Chicago offense if these injuries continue to hold, especially with Tuttle, the guy you have to watch in the injury report. So if that is the case, I'm going to be surprised if we don't see some Chicago money between now and kickoff based on how those reports end up going. Baltimore on the road at the Cincinnati Bengals. Ravens, 2.5-point favorites, minus 115 or 120. We have 2 exceptions, DK and Heritage, both showing 3. Jazz mirroring in between 3 even money, 2.5 everywhere else. Total in this game got as high as 51. We're back down to 50. Every game we've seen this year, 51, 52 on the total. You see it getting bet under. Typically, we've seen these totals get bet down on Wednesdays. This one got bet down yesterday on Tuesday. That was the point of resistance from 47 up to 41. Market said that's too much. For Cincinnati, the injuries I'm keeping my eye on, Rankins and Hill on the defensive line. I know Hendrickson has the neck stinger, but early projections suggest that he is going to play. The only thing that might change my stance on that based on what I have read is if he ends up as a DNP later today. Now, you take Hendrickson out of the game, and if you still don't have Rankins or Hill, it's a wide open opportunity for Baltimore to execute the exact same game plan they just did against the Bills in this game, because Cincinnati's not stopping anybody on the ground right now, and you take out starters number 1 and 2 and you kill Hendrickson and the pass rush that he generates. That a nightmare scenario for the Bengals defense that can't get anything going. So it is impactful. These 2 guys haven't played for a while. The numbers and how poor they've been for Cincinnati are starting to get factored in as you're seeing these totals blow up. But in this matchup, that would be very detrimental for the Bengals. Bills on the road at Houston, split between Pick'em and Bills -1, total 47.5, shaded slightly to the over. Went back and looked through a lot of the preseason numbers that we made, a lot of different models that we source and numbers we look at, as well as current in-season closing line models. Everything is making this game Pick'em or -1 either way. I mean, the market's right in line with this. There was an opposing opinion that released Houston. That didn't last. It pushed the number up. It got bet back right away. This game is just, it is what it is. It's a 50-50 game between 2 teams that we saw Buffalo overperform against a soft schedule. We've seen Houston at times underperform against a stronger schedule. Tough game, tough spot, tough number. Tough to find much to get excited about from a betting perspective. Indianapolis on the road at the Jacksonville Jags. Key guy to watch in this game is going to be Evan Ingram for Jacksonville on the injury report. Obviously, a lot of fantasy folks will have intrigue in that. He was, I guess, trending closer than expected last week based on the injury he sustained to the hamstring. We're now in the window where typically for a tight end, you see them return at this junction. Would expect he has a greater than 50% chance to play. There was a very good article I read yesterday from Ben Solak about how the Jags offense is just struggling to find easy plays. Everything's being forced downfield. There's no easy button being pushed. And Ingram last year, although frustrating, was being used in a lot of those quick throws, short depth of target right at the line of scrimmage. That would work very well against a Colts defense, which is just banged up at every level. And you have to continue watching what you're getting from Kwity Paye, what you're getting from Kenny Moore. There's so many injuries across the defensive front and the secondary for Indy that as I look at this game, if you start to get maybe a little bit of optimism for the Jags offense, you have the Colts defense banged up, and there's still Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor. Oh, by the way, quarterback 1 and running back 1. Both of those guys' status, at best, I would say each is 50-50. So if you get one of the two, I'd be it seems like Taylor's less surprising to play based on where we stand here on a Wednesday morning than Richardson, who might be a bit of a longer shot to play in this spot. But running backs with a high ankle designation, mild, moderate, or severe, typically miss a game for Richardson with 3 different injuries and his mobility to get back and play in this game, given his history and his short career, seems like a stretch too. Look, I'm surprised this isn't going to push up to 3. If this shakes out and plays out how I think it might, I think we have to see 3 in this game. And so definitely the Indy report is going to be one with a lot of eyes on it later today around 10 a.m. Pacific time. Miami on the road at the New England Patriots. Another game that's split right around 50-50. We're looking at New England -1 at Circa and Buckeye, but Miami is -1 at Chris, a rare divide, but it also shows the insignificance of the number 0 when it comes to betting on the NFL. You're also looking at a total that is 35 flat at Circa, the lowest that we have seen in any game so far this season. Some bad news for New England as they are looking like potentially going forward without David Andrews, their best offensive lineman at center. Also have to keep an eye on Kyle Duggar. He was promoted to the captain of the defense. He is dealing with an injury as well. So that's a big blow to New England. Miami says they're going to go forward with Snoop Huntley at starting quarterback for this game again. I don't know what to make of this offense at all. That McDaniel presser I watched yesterday was one of the more uncomfortable press conferences I've watched, and that came after watching Doug Peterson in Jacksonville. I don't know what you're getting out of this Dolphins offense. It seems like they're just kind of holding on and waiting for Tua to potentially come back after the bye. I don't know what to make of it. Defensively, you're seeing injuries start to mount as well. Jordan Poyer, Kendall Fuller, David Long, Jalen Phillips, all dealing with injuries too. Miami feels like they're in a bad spot, but I'm looking at how much this number has flipped from where we were, never mind preseason, but where we were 2 weeks ago. And it just seems like, given everything that's going on, you take Tua out of the equation, we're at a price that just makes a lot of sense at this point. And that's just a common theme here in week 5. Cleveland on the road at the Washington Commanders. 3.5 no longer showing on the board. If they are, it is Cleveland -120. We're back to 3 -20 at Chris, Circa, and Buckeye. Cleveland Browns injuries. Good luck making sense of it. David Njoku seems like he is trending back to be playing this week. I think that's a better than 50% chance we see him back, but we still are looking at Jedrick Wills. We're still looking at Jack Conklin. We're still trying to figure out Ethan Pochik as well to get an official designation. Left tackle, center, right tackle. Everything that was mentioned about Conklin and Wills made it seem like that was going to be later in the week, a decision being made, designation. That was the official reference. When you hear later in the week, that's not typically an optimistic phrasing for what you're getting out of 2 guys who are hurt. So something to keep an eye on today. Very likely we probably see both with the DNP designation to begin the week. Las Vegas on the road at the Denver Broncos. Broncos a 3 -105 favorite at Chris. 3 even money at Buckeye, 2.5 -120 at Circa. Very short total, 38 bet down as low as 35.5 in this game. Not a whole lot to take away from this game, take away from any of the movement. We're just seeing this 2.5 slowly leak towards 3. When you're looking at injuries from the Denver Broncos, nothing super notable, pretty clean report that you're seeing for Las Vegas. There's the Davante Adams news that obviously popped up yesterday. I don't know how much of the injury from last week that was designated as a hamstring and him not playing necessarily carried over into this week with the Raiders winning last week. If you're looking at the look-ahead price on this game for reference, it was Denver -1.5. We are now out to a very soft 3. So it's, I think, partially, if not entirely, being priced into this spot because there's not a lot you can take away from the Broncos' offensive performance at the Jets to get excited about in the 10-9 upset win. So I don't think this move is result-driven. So you have Davante Adams requesting the trade. Hard to say. If he's missing last week, he's now requesting the trade. He did an interview with Kay Adams yesterday where he said he's had no contact with the team. Nothing about that makes it sound like he is set to come back and play in this game. And I have questions overall, like what is the injury? Is it an actual injury to begin with? Defensively, we haven't heard anything about Max Crosby yet this week. So you have the best player again on offense and on defense, both dealing with conflicting scenarios. That's kind of a mystery that you have to sort through too, but it seems like all of that really being accounted for in this number that continues to move up in favor of the Denver Broncos. Arizona on the road at the San Francisco 49ers. Still concerns on the right side of the offensive line. It looks like Beachum is in line to play again with Jonah Williams on IR. Everything that I watched back yesterday, everything that I read from people rewatching the Cardinals game, film analysts, was saying how big of a disaster things were for Beachum on the right side of the offensive line. When you think about who he is going to face in this game playing San Francisco and the step up in competition, that seems like a big problem for Arizona. Trey McBride still dealing with the concussion. His absence was very visible in the offensive game plan last week. San Francisco goes from 6.5 through 7, currently sitting at 7 minus 120 for the most part across the board. 7.5's even money or minus 105, effectively pricing the same with a total in this game at 50, which took some over money from a smaller group yesterday later in the afternoon and pushed things up just a little bit further. When you're looking at 49ers injuries, Fred Warner and Hufanga would be the two ones I'm keeping my eye on this Wednesday morning. Green Bay on the road at the LA Rams. Packers a soft 3.5-point favorite as Rams money slowly starts to come into the market. Christian Watson is not going to be playing in this game for Green Bay, so they take a bit of a ding at wide receiver, losing him. Still have Reed, still have Dobbs, still have when you're talking about the Green Bay Packers receiver, in my mind, I visualize the depth chart, and I'm like, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. You take everyone's effectively a wide receiver 1. So they're not going to have Watson, as I correct myself on this. They will have Reed. They will have Dobbs. They will have Wicks. They have plenty of options, plenty of weapons to go into L.A. on the fast surface and play a Rams defense that is struggling, and that's putting it very lightly. When you're looking at how much this number has been adjusted up, it's a pretty significant bump as the Rams are really starting to see their pricing drop quite a bit. So I'm not super surprised to see the 3.5s taken out. But when we're looking at the total, it's been one-way money on the overs. We're now touching 48. This Packers offense on turf indoors is a scary offense to face for a defense as bad as the LA Rams are. New York Giants on the road at the Seattle Seahawks. 6.5s are taken out across the board for Seattle. Seattle goes out of their way with what I would consider to be a pretty surprising signing as they're dealing with offensive line injuries. But they go, and I mean, you want to talk about a reach in adding Jason Peters, 42-year-old, straight off of the couch as a reflection of how desperate the times are on the Seattle offensive line. That was a pretty incredible ad that they made. Geno Smith has been performing admirably when dealing with pressure and getting around the offensive line so far this season. Is 42-year-old Peters an upgrade over Stone Forsythe? I have no idea. And so it made a bit of a splash. Just a weird move by Seattle, I feel. Now, defensively, that's the more important part of this equation. Jerome Baker was labeled as a guy who is close to coming back and should be back for this game. And then it was mentioned that everybody else on defense is on their own timeline. So that's kind of an ominous report from Mike McDonald. But it's Leonard Williams and Nwosu, Boye Mafe, as well as Julian Love. So you have some key starters in addition to Byron Murphy, the rookie, at multiple levels of the defense to watch out for the Seattle Seahawks this week. For the New York Giants, obviously Malik Neighbors from the Thursday game, still in the concussion protocol. He has the extra days to clear it. Typically, it's pretty rough for a wide receiver to clear protocol on a regular week. If you add in a few more extra days, better chance to do it. Early in the season, we've seen teams with players concussed kind of be pretty strict about who they let through. We're seeing it not only with receivers, but anybody on both sides of the football. Same thing that happened last year, but as the season goes on, you see the concussion protocol just kind of be a recommendation as you get into the later portion of November and into December. But at this stage of the season, we've seen teams across the league really deal with caution. So I wonder how Malik Neighbors is going to be handled in this game. Dallas on the road at the Pittsburgh Steelers, 2.5 for Pittsburgh across the board. Total in this game, 42.5, shaded up towards 43. Could definitely see a bit of over money coming in between now And Friday, DeMarcus Lawrence is going to miss. Micah Parsons is going to miss. No word yet on Carson, cornerback number 2 over in Dallas. So that's something that you have to watch out for potentially. Don't know how much Pittsburgh is necessarily going to threaten the outside corners past Lewis and Diggs, but certainly with Justin Fields, you have a bit of a different dynamic if that defensive front for Dallas is banged up. Still looking for answers on the offensive line for the Pittsburgh Steelers with Daniels now on IR, waiting to see what's going on with Samalo at left guard. So they have some O-line issues up front, but how much are those going to be tested with the defensive injuries that Dallas has up front to their pass rush? So a bit of a weakness on weakness scenario developing where either side may not be able to fully exploit the depth of the injuries that both teams have. And then in Monday Night Football, New Orleans on the road at the Kansas City Chiefs. For the Chiefs, there's no injury news that's necessarily urgent. We know what it is with Rice being taken out. He was second in offensive production as well as usage, behind only Malik Neighbors. He's not going to play in this game. He may not play for the remainder of the season, but the official timeline not yet announced. That's the extent of what you have with the Chiefs' injuries. Now it's just trying to figure out what in the world are the Kansas City Chiefs. They're basically back to what they were a season ago. For the New Orleans Saints, a couple more urgent issues. Demario Davis on defense. If the Chiefs switch because of the injury to Rice to more 2 tight end sets, to using multiple running backs, to getting Hunt more involved, especially in the passing game, to featuring Noah Gray a little bit more, and you don't have Davis in the middle of the defense for New Orleans, that's a big blow. Willie Gay, obviously very familiar with Kansas City. He's banged up. And then on the offensive line, the Chiefs' injuries, or the Saints' injuries, basically settled, but we're still looking at Cesar Ruiz, who's not a standout offensive lineman, but next to Eric McCoy, we did see the Saints' offensive line look a lot weaker than what it has been outside of every other game, except for that Eagles game where the Eagles just dominated them up front. So a lot to sort through. This is just a messy week, to put it lightly. Chiefs were definitely interesting, but now you have one service go earlier from a group. They release KC. You have a counterpoint like 30 minutes later on the Saints as that number got up to 6. You got 2 clear buy points on that. Cleveland, Washington. Every time it touches 3.5, we see Washington money back into the market. That just looked like a traditional spot. Jets, Minnesota. Another one of those spots that you could look at and circle, but you have Aaron Rodgers that probably isn't 100%. So how is that going to look? You have the unknown of the stadium factors and the weather. The Buffalo-Houston game, priced effectively. Indy-Jacksonville, you'd love to play against those Colts injuries, but again, like we're talking back and forth. We're like, should we not be expecting a better number here for Jacksonville, considering that they're winless and the Colts have all these injuries? Like you would have thought you get a little bit potentially of a discount on the number for how bad Jacksonville has been and how ominous everything is sounding from Doug Peterson in press conferences, throwing his players under the bus. And here the Jags are laying 3. And so that becomes a tough spot too. And so it's just everywhere across the board in these spots that are lining up. And you see, you're either just getting a price that's really fair, or you're betting on a team that has just a very clear and obvious negative. It's making it very, very tough. So again, a lot of conviction last week, a lot of success. This week's really, really tough to navigate. And that's just the nature of the NFL and how the schedule ebbs and flows and what you get as you go through the season. So I'm not trying to intentionally kind of waffle back and forth. It's just like there's not a lot here for betting in week number 5. But we'll continue to keep on doing the market rundowns for the remainder of the week and hopefully find something that we can jump on and work with as the week goes on. Appreciate everybody for stopping by this Wednesday morning. Hope to see you over on the preview live stream, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern on the RAS Picks YouTube channel. Have a fantastic Wednesday, everybody. See you on the live stream and talk to you again here on the podcast bright and early tomorrow morning.